Target, Citigroup, the financial giant rejecting calls to spin off some of its units. But would it be better for the company and its investors if it just broke itself up? Well, Peter Cohen is president of Peter Cohen and Associates, and that is a management consulting and venture cap firm. And he's also going to be joining us for this discussion as well, because Liz McDonald has been following this as well. Our in-house expert, I got to say here, Liz. I got to give you
that might be an
on this
overstatement.
So, Peter, before I let you know that Liz is here and she has some very strong opinions about Citigroup, I just want to warn you. Is Citigroup too big to fail, or should they break up because they might fail?
Well, it's a terrible concept. I mean, it was very popular when Sandy Weil was around. He had this idea of the one-stop shop. The fact of the matter is people don't want to buy all their financial services from one place. They want to diversify. I mean, what happens if you have auction rate securities and they're frozen, and you have all your other assets at Citigroup and you can't get them out? It's very, very frustrating. If you split them up in different financial services firms, you're much better off as a customer. You know, I think this is a hundred-armed corporate octopus. It's a mess. It's totally unmanageable.
Yeah, you know, that is the rap on this bank down on Wall Street. In other words, that it's being held together by, you know, baling wire and glue and masking tape. You know, they have all these disparate technologies, a really sagging, unwieldy balance sheet. The question is, if you break it up, who gets those rotten assets? In other words, $240 billion in really bad subprime mortgage-backed securities, $170 billion in these collateralized debt obligations. Where does all that go?
Well, here's two things. First of all, the market right now for those things is terrible. If you can hold on to them long enough for perhaps the time when the market revives, then some people may want to buy them. Right now is a terrible time to be trying to sell them, and I have to commend Vikram Pandit for saying, hey, you know, we're not going to do this all at once. We're going to wait 3 to 5 years. But they've got, you know, $40 trillion worth of derivatives on there. They've got all sorts of off-balance sheet entities like Enron did. I mean, there's a lot of junk in there.
Peter, Tom Sullivan, I'll tell you, you sound very much like what we talked about back in the 80s when Resolution Trust came along. You go back to the 30s and you have the government getting involved in buying a lot of these bad assets because they had the time to hold on to them. They actually wound up, as you know, making money on them many years later, but they were able to hang on to them. Barney Frank's talking about this. Do you see the government coming in and picking up these bad assets from these banks?
Well, to some extent, the Fed already has. I mean, they're temporarily taking them off the balance sheet with these loans that they're making to the investment banks and to the banks. But I think that it should stay private. I don't think the government should be getting involved. I think they made their own mistakes and they have to pay their own price. Yeah, I don't think it's a bad idea to let them have the time to find a better price. But I definitely think they should deal with it.
I don't disagree with you, but do you think it's going to happen?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Right, and I don't think the Federal Reserve has a balance sheet itself to take it, right? Don't you think? I think it's only got a $900 billion balance sheet to back it up.
You start a resolution trust, you issue bonds for that, and away you go.
Peter, I want to ask you about the consumer angle. You know, you've got a company, look at Chase, for example. This is a bank where it's one-stop shopping for everything. It's your mortgage, your checking, your savings. It's all of that. I mean, why can't Citi be that for the consumer and make it work? I mean, less is more. It's like a walled garden approach for the web, except it's your bank. It's the one-stop shop for everything.
I wouldn't want to do that. I mean, as a consumer, I don't want all my money in one basket, because what if one of those baskets goes sour and the whole thing goes sour? I want to be diversified. But the problem with Citigroup is that it made all these acquisitions and it never really integrated them. As somebody mentioned before, they've got all these disparate systems that don't talk to each other. The people don't work together very well. And so from a consumer standpoint, if they wanted to see all their accounts with Citigroup in one easy system to know how they're doing in all their different accounts, it's very hard to do it because they don't have their systems talking to each other. Maybe that's what Chase has done, is to get all the systems working together and all the people working together so it actually works for those kinds of consumers that want to have a one-stop shop. But Citigroup never integrated all the pieces.
Do you think big chunks of the bank will be sold off within the next year, say Banamex or Primerica? Do you think that this bank will be broken up, even though the top executives say flatly, no, we're not breaking it up? Do you think it will happen?
No, I think what they're going to do is they're going to sell 18% of it as $400 billion of the assets. What I'm concerned about is if they get rid of the really valuable pieces, because that's what people want to buy right now, then they get a premium for them, and they keep the junk. I'd rather have them wait and kind of sell at a reasonable price and not feel very rushed and find alternative sources of capital. But I think it's a huge mess. It's a 100-arm octopus, and it needs to become much more focused. I would break it into two pieces: the consumer bank and the corporate bank. I'd split those two off. I'd have them focusing on how can they compete effectively for consumer business and how can they compete effectively for corporate business, and not have the two combined together. I don't think that adds any value. And over time, I think they're going to have to even split those pieces up. But I think as a first order of breaking up, they should split it into those two pieces.
All right, Peter Cohen, we're going to leave it there on that very strong up. Peter, great to see you. Thank you for being